Welcome back to the Wedge 52 Gridiron Podcast. I'm your host, Wedge. Today's episode will be a quick run through slash preview of every single NFL team in the NFC Conference. Before we jump in, please make sure you follow the Wedge 52 Gridiron on all platforms. You can find that link in the description below this episode, wherever you are choosing to listen. And with that being said, let's jump right into today's episode. A quick preview on every single NFC team. We're going to start off with the NFC East, starting with the Dallas Cowboys. They lost Tony Pollard and Tyron Smith this offseason. One of the top, statistical teams last year in terms of production, especially offensively. Defense was, top 10 or so as well. That offense put up a lot of yards, a lot of points, and they were a first-round exit to the Green Bay Packers last year in the playoffs. They lost Tony Pollard, as I said, picked up Ezekiel Elliott, former Cowboy, got to start to his career in Dallas. He's back along with Royce Freeman. Lots of defenders that they lost in the offseason this year. They did sign Eric Kendricks, however, to kind of, be that center middle linebacker. They obviously have Deron Bland still. And the Diggs brother is healthy now after missing most of last season with an injury. I forget exactly what it was. I want to say it might have been an ACL. He should be back. CeeDee Lamb, top 3 wide receiver in the NFL. He signed an extension just recently after holding out most of offseason and training camp into the preseason. Just signed that deal a few days ago. One of the top paid wide receivers in the NFL, deservingly so. CeeDee Lamb has been statistically improving receptions, yards, and touchdowns every single season of his career. Tremendous talent out wide for Dak Prescott in CeeDee Lamb. Speaking of Dak Prescott, he, waiting on an extension. Jerry Jones said they're not in a rush. Dak Prescott said it is what it is with Jerry Jones. So we'll see how that plays out throughout the season. Dak said he will play without the extension. He's been participating in all offseason, requirements for the Dallas Cowboys training camp, preseason, practice, stuff like that. So Dak will be at the realm. We'll see what happens after this year, during this year, with Dak Prescott and the Cowboys. But they are poised to have a good season again. Moving into the New York Giants, Daniel Jones is back after his season-ending injury last season. Saquon Barkley is gone for the New York Giants, went to rival team, the Philadelphia Eagles. However, the New York Giants did select Malik Nabers in that first round. LSU standout wide receiver last year, 89 catches, 1,500 yards, 14 touchdowns for Malik Nabers. He's going to be teaming up with Jalen Hyatt, Wan'Dale Robinson, who's expected to have, increased role. Hopefully his production is increased as well. And then they did go out and get Devin Singletary to fill that replacement at running back with Saquon Barkley. Obviously not quite the same as Saquon Barkley. Devin Singletary, however, is, reputable running back. Solid pickup there for them. And then on defense, they put in a little bit of work. On a defense led by the names of Brian Burns and Jordan Phillips on that defensive line / edge. Huge pieces. They made the big trade for Panthers, outside linebacker edge Brian Burns early in the offseason to try and, give some sort of spark to that D-line, who does have some other pieces there still, looking for a defensive unit to improve this season. And then, a little bit of pressure on Daniel Jones if he doesn't, perform well. Obviously, he was struggling start of last year before getting injured, I want to say in week 9. He was struggling. They added quarterback Drew Lock, who, is, right on that cusp of backup versus, low-level starter type of quarterback throughout his career. But, enough of a name, enough stats, and abilities behind Drew Lock's name, to put a little bit of pressure on Daniel Jones to perform better than he did the start of last season after receiving his contract. Moving into the Eagles. The Eagles obviously picked up Saquon Barkley from the New York Giants. Shocker, he went, to a division rival from Saquon Barkley. His, relationship with the Giants ownership and management was, obviously shot. Hence why he's now in Philly. The Eagles have a Week 5 bye. I believe this is the only team where I talk about the bye in the team's season preview. That's because last year the Eagles, after starting off very hot, collapsed. They fell 1-5 in their last 6 regular season games, as well as losing to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the first round of the playoffs. 1-5 to close out the season last year. Definitely not a good look for Philly. It'll be interesting to note how they finish, obviously how they start, but how they progress and finish the second half of the season this year, especially with that early Week 5 bye. No kind of rest or reset to look forward to, on that back half of the season for them. If they are struggling, it could be a slippery slope very quickly again. Last year they had major defensive struggles, kind of led to them being picked apart in that second half, final third of the season there. They did lose, Fletcher Cox, Hassan Reddick, both gone. However, they did pick up linebackers Devin White, Bryce Huff, and defensive back CJ Gardner-Johnson has rejoined the Philadelphia Eagles. So they're looking to make improvements via free agency. As well in the draft, they took cornerbacks in their first 2 selections with Kenyon Mitchell from Toledo and Cooper DeJean from Iowa. 2 big name cornerbacks, that was being prospected and ranked and all that during the draft. 2 of the top 4 or 5 names that are on most people's cornerback list. Philly definitely putting in that work to improve that defense, and hopefully get them back into playoff contention this year. Jason Kelce obviously retired, but they do have that, offensive weaponry. Still just picked up Saquon. Still have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert, behind Jalen Hurts. I think the Eagles will be in good shape. Will just be interesting to see how they perform, as the season goes on. It's going to be a long season for them. They have 4 games, a break, and then, 13 more games, before the playoffs. I'm thinking they'll probably make the playoffs, but we'll see. That long stretch of games after collapsing at the end of last season does concern me for the Eagles. Moving to the Commanders, last team in the NFC East. They obviously selected quarterback Jaden Daniels, I believe number 2 overall from LSU, Heisman winner in college. Jaden Daniels, I do think, has ability to play at this level. In terms of what eliteness level he'll be, that will be determined here. They are pairing him up with Cliff Kingsbury, who's back in the NFL as an offensive coordinator for the Commanders, and new coach Dan Quinn for the Commanders, who pretty much cleaned staff of that coaching staff last year after Rivera and company just did not simply perform the past several years. And they also signed running back Austin Eckler, signed aging tight end Zach Ertz, but good mentality, been through the NFL for a long time, has veteran status, knowledge to spread to others. Although maybe asked to play a decent role in that offense, I think his wisdom and veteran capabilities can bring a lot to that offense, especially to new quarterback Jane Daniels. He can alongside offensive coordinator or for offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury, as well as they did lose some pieces. They picked up a couple, lost a couple. They lost Antonio Gibson, they lost Curtis Samuel, and then on defense, adding some names here. They had Klein Farrell, Dante Fowler, Wagner, and cornerback Bradley Chin, I think is his first name. Kicked up cornerback Chin. A lot of ads on defense to try and help that defensive unit, grow a little bit. That did struggle some last year. Moving into the NFC West, starting off with the Arizona Cardinals. Kyler Murray is back, healthy. Obviously played, quite a few games last season. Looked solid in them. Didn't have, a full offseason, rehabbing from that ACL tear the year prior. But he was looking solid towards the end of last season. Kyler Murray now pairing up with Marvin Harrison Jr., a standout wide receiver from Ohio State University. They drafted him very high up, I think number 4 overall for him. Marvin Harrison right there. They also signed Zay Jones, although he is suspended for the first part of the season. Hollywood Brown did leave, however, in free agency. He went to Kansas City. But they do have a couple of other pieces on offense there. James Conner has really had a resurgence at that tailback position the past few years in Arizona. And Trey McBride, tight end, is starting to, show what he can do in the NFL. The past, I think this last year was his second year, I believe. Trey McBride has really, stepped it up. The Arizona Cardinals team, well, I don't think will be, playoff contender. I do think they are moving in the right direction, especially offensively. Obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. should help them out there. But that is the Arizona Cardinals. Looking at the Los Angeles Rams, obviously, impressive, run last season after people maybe didn't think they were going to be anything really. Matthew Stafford has the ability to win football games. He's made that very prevalent, especially since moving to LA. In Detroit, not always having all of the pieces there for him there. But in Los Angeles, he has been proven to be a winner. One of the underrated quarterbacks of the NFL. Now, he's got weapons too. Kyron Williams, standout, played very, very well last season. They drafted running back Blake Corum out of Michigan, as well as the wide receiver duo of Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. Puka, obviously, incredible rookie season for a wide receiver. Best ever, probably, rookie wide receiver season. On the defensive side, very young and under a new defensive coordinator, Chris Shula. And then, obviously, Aaron Donald, the GOAT defensive lineman, retired in this offseason there for the Los Angeles Rams. I do predict them being a good team, a credible threat, not necessarily maybe to win the whole thing, but I do think they are one of the better teams in the NFC out there in Los Angeles. Moving to the 49ers. Obviously, just lost to the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Probably the best team in the NFC. One of a couple there. But 49ers, obviously, weapons on offense. Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, and Brandon Ayuk, who just signed finally after a long offseason of trade talks and holdouts. Brandon Ayuk signed his massive contract extension, I believe paying him $30 million a year, putting him in that upper echelon of wide receiver salaries in terms of dollars per year. Me personally, I don't quite think Brandon Ayuk is in that conversation of $30+ million wide receivers. Is he top 10 to 12? Yes, most 99% chance, yes. Haven't sat down and made a full wide receiver list in a minute. I do know he's not in my top 5, but that could be a story for another day. Comment down below here, wherever you're listening, or hop over on Instagram and comment below. Do you think Brandon Ayuk is in your top 5 wide receivers? If so, let me know. Moving to the defensive side, very solid defensive unit as well. They got Bosa, Leonard Floyd, Brandon Hargrave on the defensive line. Fred Warner obviously locking down that linebacker position. And then Ward back there in the DB slot, cornerback for the San Francisco 49ers. I do predict the 49ers to be one of those top 2 or 3 teams in the NFC here this season. Moving into the Seattle Seahawks, they got a new head coach, Mike McDonald. Pete Carroll is no longer first head coaching change for the Seahawks in quite some time. I want to say maybe 15, 16 plus years. I don't know exactly, but it's definitely been a long time. I want to say Pete Carroll got there in 2009. Don't quote me on that, but somewhere around there. Mike McDonald, obviously new head coach coming from that Baltimore Ravens defensive unit that was spectacular last year. He'll be having Geno Smith at the quarterback position. It's time for him as well. A little bit of pressure on him this year to perform as well. Last year kind of a down year, after the comeback season that he put on 2 years ago. Sam Howell is signed with the Seattle Seahawks, was with the Commanders. Sam Howell, I do think, is capable. I don't think he was the problem in Washington. Obviously, decent amount of turnovers for Sam Howell last year. But he had the weapons. He had the passing yards, and touchdowns were quite honestly there for Sam Howell. With what he was dealing with, Sam Howell and the Washington Commanders quarterbacks were running for their lives last year. He was probably sacked top 5 times in the league last year, as well as that defense who, could not help them when they needed to help. But so Sam Howell putting a little bit of pressure on Geno this year. Running back duo of Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. Very good duo there. Kenneth Walker has been incredible his first 2 years in the league here. And then potentially best wide receiver trio in the NFL, potentially DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Tyler Lockett looking to help out their quarterback. Going to be Geno to start. We'll see how long it lasts. I do think Geno is still capable of being that quarterback, but potentially a short string to see what Sam Howell can maybe do there for them if things are not working out. They drafted Byron Murphy, 16th overall, defensive tackle from Texas. He will be paired up with Leonard Williams on the inside of that interior defensive line. They have a solid unit there, right there, as well as on the back end. So kind of, front and center on that D-line, interior D-line, as well as that cornerback duo that they have with Witherspoon and Tariq Woolen. Seattle, in position to have a decent season. I don't think they're going to quite be a threat for the NFC, but the NFC is much more open than the AFC. However, the Seahawks are in a division with the Rams and 49ers, who I think both of them will make the playoffs, making it hard for Seattle to sneak in. We will see how that one all shakes out. Moving into the NFC North, starting off with the Chicago Bears, obviously selected Caleb Williams, quarterback out of USC, number 1 overall this past April. And then they went out. They got him some weapons. They already had DJ Moore. They went out. They got Keenan Allen. They drafted Rome Odunze. They picked up DeAndre Swift. They picked up Gerald Everett to pair with Cole Kmet. The Bears' offense has increased its weapons production this year. I think last year, while Caleb Williams, it's to be determined if he's going to be an upgrade over Justin Fields. I would probably say he will be. I do think, a larger problem for the Chicago Bears last year was that offensive line unit. Justin Fields, part of his issues were he was running for his life, one of the most sacked quarterbacks last year. They did make, minority improvements, no big splashes, no big investments into that offensive line. Obviously, draft first round, they took Caleb and Rome. However, I do think they made some improvements. Is it going to be good enough? We will see from that Chicago Bears offensive line. Will they be good enough? I think that has a major impact on Caleb Williams, progression. Caleb Williams' rookie season. It's great to have weapons. It's not great to have weapons that you cannot get the ball to. Moving to the defensive side for the Chicago Bears, not a whole lot going on. They did select or picked up Kevin Byard to replace safety Eddie Jackson. And then, forgot to mention, Chicago Bears do have a new offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, who was the Seattle Seahawks offensive coordinator the past couple of years, where we've seen Geno Smith, especially 2 years ago with that resurgence. So, looking to, imitate that production, that offense of, Geno and the 3 receivers with Seattle, moving them to, Caleb Williams and those 3 good receivers in Chicago. Now, moving to the Detroit Lions, coming off the best season ever for Detroit. I think so. First ever division title, AFC North or NFC North title. First ever NFC championship game, which quite frankly, they had the game. They were up largely in that second half and kind of, a couple of turnovers, couple mishaps, and, they ended up losing. Heartbreaking for Detroit. Still, however, their best season ever last year. I do think, the one thing they needed a little bit of improvement was that defense. They were 23rd in points, 19th in yards, 27th in passing yards, and it kind of showed in that second half of the 49ers game. The weaponry of the San Fran offense just caught up to them in that second half. Detroit was on the road. They did go out, and signed some good names for that defense. Marcus Davenport, DJ Reader on the defensive line, Carlton Davis, defensive backs. And then they drafted cornerback duos of Arnold and Rackestaw. So Detroit investing in that defense, investing in those DBs, 3 DBs, early drafted or signed during free agency, picked up a couple D linemen. I do think Detroit has made the effort to improve that defense. And then, that Detroit offense, one of the best in the league last year. I do project them to be one of the best offenses in the league again. Jared Goff has been incredible in terms of doing what he needs to do for the Detroit Lions offense. Jared Goff is not going to be your guy making flashy throws. He's not going to be running for big scrambles. He's not going to be doing this. He's not going to be doing that. What Jared Goff does very well is find his targets, find his weapons, and make smart decisions. He doesn't turn the ball over on interceptions. Jared Goff, it's easy when you have the weapons of Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, Jameson Williams, hopefully, starts to do a little bit more for that Detroit offense. Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, they invested in their offensive line, keeping Penei Sewell in Detroit long term. Lots of extensions for Detroit this offseason, and not to mention on that defense, they already had Aiden Hutchinson as kind of that corner piece on defense. I do think the biggest threat to the NFC, I do think, comes down to the Detroit Lions and the San Francisco 49ers. We will see which one comes out on top. Maybe someone else comes out on top. That will be determined as the season goes on. Moving to the Minnesota Vikings, they drafted J.J. McCarthy, quarterback out of Michigan, in that first round. He, however, is out for the season with a season-ending injury, which means Sam Darnold, free agent pickup for the Minnesota Vikings, will be the starting quarterback. They do have Justin Jefferson for him to throw to, who is now the highest paid wide receiver in the league, who I think is the best wide receiver in the league. Had 1,000-plus yards last year, missed 7 games, had 3 different quarterbacks. Justin Jefferson is ridiculous no matter what. Best wide receiver in the league so far, or, in the league right now. He does also have Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson to throw the ball to, and the Vikings did go and snag former Packers running back Aaron Jones for that backfield position. They are in a tough division, which may make things hard for them this season with, just defense. They struggled. They did have a plethora of defensive additions, but I do think, they'll be fighting uphill, up mountain, whatever you want to call it, in this division with obviously the Detroit Lions. I think the Packers can be solid again. And the Bears, I'm not sure how many games they're going to win, but I do think they'll be very competitive in a lot of games. Same with the Vikings, but going to be fighting uphill for Minnesota, especially with, first round quarterback J.J. McCarthy missing the entire season. And then moving to the last team in that division, the Green Bay Packers. They made Jordan Love the highest paid player in NFL history. That one boggles my mind. Dude has played in not many games at all. Hasn't done anything spectacular. Has played well. Hasn't done anything spectacular. Last year was essentially his rookie season. They won one playoff game and then they lost. They were a 7 seed. I don't understand it. What Green Bay was doing. Jordan Love in his career as a starter, regular season, 9-9 record, 4,765 passing yards, 35 passing touchdowns, and 14 career interceptions. I don't. That one boggles me. The Packers did sign running back Josh Jacobs, former Raider. Packers looking for Josh Jacobs to kind of have a resurgence last year. I would say it's probably a down year for Josh Jacobs. Kind of even the year before that, not as much as last year, but 2022, slightly down year for Josh Jacobs after the incredible 2020 and 2021 seasons that he had. Packers are hoping that he can bring some of that production to that offense for Jordan Love, assistance, as well as the wide receivers trio, young trio that is a very solid trio with Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Jaden Reed. Other than that, not many free agency moves in or out for the Green Bay Packers. Relied on their draft and relying on that defensive unit that was, middle of the pack last year to continue to, bring them some sort of success. I'm not sure. We'll see. This will be a good tale, a good test of what Jordan Love is capable of doing this season. It boggles me that he's the highest paid player in NFL history right now. It doesn't make sense. Also moving to the last division in the NFC, that's going to be the NFC South. Starting off with the Atlanta Falcons, they signed Kirk Cousins in free agency, 4-year, $180 million, I think. And then they went and drafted Michael Penix in the first round of the NFL draft. Not sure what the Falcons were doing here. I'm sure most people were in shock. Most people are questioning that call. I'm sure a lot of people, myself included, are kind of laughing at the wasted draft pick. And this has nothing to do with Michael Penix being a bad quarterback per se. I think he's, above average. He's, a couple years older than most quarterbacks that leave the draft, especially most quarterbacks drafted that high in the NFL draft. Played well at Washington. I don't know. Now you have an older veteran quarterback, Kirk Cousins, who's under a very large contract for 4 years. And now you have a first-round rookie quarterback that's older than most rookie quarterbacks under a 4-year first-round type of contract. Doesn't make sense to me if you're the Atlanta Falcons. To me, it seems like a wasted money, a whole lot of it. It seems like a wasted draft pick for Atlanta. I mean, Kirk Cousins is going to start. Is he not? Like, Kirk Cousins historically is one of the, at least during his career, Kirk Cousins has been, one of the upper quarterbacks. Has he been top 5? Not really. I would probably put him at border of 10 to 15. But Kirk Cousins, does what he needs to do very well. Puts up big yards for his receivers. Finds a lot of his receivers in the end zone. This is a very interesting situation in Atlanta. They do have, however, on the weapons side, they have Drake London. I do like what they did. Went out and got Darnell Mooney, Rondale Moore. I think the Falcons do have some good weapons for Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins has done well when he has weapons. I mean, look what he did in Minnesota the past few years. Taking them to the playoffs, not much of success in the playoffs, but, he gets his team in position to win games. And that's really essentially what you need out of your quarterback at the end of the day. They do also have Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, tight end Kyle Pitts for that Atlanta Falcons weapons for Kirk Cousins. Moving to the defense for them, mid to bad defense mostly for most of last season. I do think they showed flashes of being better. Not a ton of free agent defensive signings for the Falcons, but they did make a big effort in the draft this past April for defensive improvements in Atlanta. Moving to the Carolina Panthers, they're looking for quarterback Bryce Young to have a sophomore, improvement. They need a sophomore jump out of Bryce Young. Not necessarily always given the best positioning last year to be able to succeed, but they did do some more work to help him out in this offseason. Obviously, they had Adam Thielen. Mingo is still there. They signed in free agency Deontay Johnson, as well as drafted Xavier Legette, I believe first round, if not very, very early second round for Xavier Legette out of South Carolina. So they're making, efforts to improve Bryce Young's chances, upgrading his weapons some. Running backs is going to be Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard. Lots of defensive turnover, lots of, couple starters, couple rotational guys. left in free agency. Obviously, they traded Brian Burns. A lot of guys coming in. Maybe a couple of starters, a couple of depth guys. A lot of turnover on that defense. We'll see if it leads to success for the Carolina Panthers. Moving to the New Orleans Saints. They're sticking with the trio of Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, and Chris Olave. Not really much other movement on that offensive side of the ball during this offseason. Alvin Kamara looking to have a better season. I think Alvin Kamara can perform better than what he did last year, although he had a good year. Chris Olave, I do think they need to feed him the ball if they want any chance. This is a bad division. Let's be honest. I would say the Bucs will most likely win the division. But I do think the Saints, the Falcons might have a fighting chance. It'll be interesting to see. I'm sure it will be another subpar division. Last year, I'm not sure if any of these four teams get over 10 wins. Chris Olave needs to be a part of the Saints offense, even more so this year if the Saints want that chance to have 10 plus wins this season. On the defense, they added Chase Young, who I do think has some stuff in the tank. I think Chase Young can perform well for a defensive unit. We'll see if that happens for the Saints this year. I think he did play solid for the 49ers last year in those, I think he got picked up halfway through the season by the 49ers. Did play solid there. Obviously, a lot of other talent on that 49ers defense that helps him, play better, just based on surroundings. And then they did draft Kool-Aid McKinstry, cornerback from Alabama, in the draft for New Orleans. Moving to the last team of the NFC, and that is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Running it back with the Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Rachaad White offensive unit. Obviously, Baker Mayfield signed the extension. Mike Evans came back. He was a free agent early on. He did re-sign there in Tampa Bay. So they are running it back on offense. Obviously, they made the playoffs. They won a game. Competed in the second game when they ultimately lost to, I believe it was Detroit. Moving to, I may have misspoke. Can't quite remember if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won a playoff game. Yes, they upset the Eagles, kept it close against Detroit. We're all good. They did, however, lose a couple of linebackers that were big pieces on that defensive unit in Devin White and Shaquille Barrett, both leaving via free agency. That is a wrap on the NFC. Quick rundown, things to expect, key additions, things that I'm keeping my eye on for every single NFC team as we head into the 2024 NFL regular season. Make sure you press that follow button wherever you are listening to this. Please also check me out on all other platforms. Follow there, turn on post notifications to stay up to date with everything Wedge 52 Gridiron this season. We are back with more content. Make sure you tap in for tomorrow's episode of the Wedge 52 Gridiron podcast, where I will be going over every single AFC team's offseason and previewing things to look for and watch as the NFL season begins in 2024. Thank you so much for listening if you made it this far. And remember, go Ravens.